In the 3rd chapter of Matthew, we read these verses. Jesus came down from Galilee to the Jordan to be baptized by John. And John said, "No, I need to be baptized you, and you come to me?" And Jesus replied, "Let it be so now, for it is proper for us to do this, to fulfill all righteousness." And John consented, and as soon as Jesus was baptized and he came up out of the water, at that very moment the heaven was opened, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and lighting upon him. And a voice from heaven saying, "This is my Son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased." The word from the Lord in the house of the Lord. I want to talk a little about baptism, if I may. Many of us get baptized as infants. Some of us get baptized as young adults, and some of us even get baptized as old adults. There is a one-time baptism, because a baptism is a connection with Christ. And Christ never breaks a connection. So you don't need to be ever baptized again. At least that's what us Methodists believe. If you don't believe that, that's okay. But I'm not going to baptize you again if you've been baptized, because once is enough. I will reconsider your baptism. I will help you relive your baptism. I will reconnect with your baptism. I will do a lot of reads to your baptism if that's what you want. But you only need to be baptized once, whether you're an infant or an adult. Infant baptism means very simply that someone has committed that child to a relationship with Christ. What we sometimes forget as we do that for an infant is that at that very moment we promise that for the rest of our life we will lead a life that will connect that child to Christ. And too often, too often we're willing to go back to whatever kind of life we had before, and if it wasn't the kind of life that connects to Christ, we live it anyway. So if there's a breakdown in baptism, it's not the baby that got baptized, but rather the people who have been godparents or parents who don't remember why they were baptized. Do you know why you were baptized? Do you have a reason for being baptized? Christ was baptized with water by John in the River Jordan. Now, in the Jewish tradition, you had to be baptized in running water because what they were doing was cleansing themselves. It was a rite of cleansing and getting rid of their sins. And if you were baptized in still water, the sins stayed there. So you had to be baptized in running water so that the sins were washed away. The Essenes who lived up in the desert and wrote some of the Dead Sea Scrolls and that sort of thing, had a series of pools in their compound. So that if you were one of the new people and therefore the dirtiest people who came to their compound, you had to bathe in the last pool. And then as you became more perfected and as you became more pure, you got to move up, and finally, when you had really arrived, you got to bathe into the first pool because you were not contaminating all that water very much because you were already pretty pure. Well, we never quite make that level of purity. Why was Christ baptized? It certainly wasn't to wash away sins. Christian baptism has never been fully about washing away sins. Because if we are fully Christian, we don't have any sins to be washed away. Now that's pretty... I don't know about you, but yesterday I probably sinned 3 or 4 times. Well, maybe only twice. I'm trying to remember. But that isn't what baptism was about. Your sins are washed away by the blood of Christ, not by the water of the church. Your sins are washed away by the sacrifice of the one who loved you enough to give himself up totally so that your sins would never anchor you to hell. And he did that on the cross. He did that when he rose from the dead. So why would he to go to John and say, baptize me? John understood that he was far more holy than John himself was. But when Christ insisted, John went ahead and did the baptism. Because he was fulfilling the Jewish prophecies, he was fulfilling the Jewish law, he was fulfilling the Jewish traditions, and establishing himself as a person at that point who needed to be connected with God. We see this is the beginning of the holiness of Christ. Up until then, well, we saw him in Egypt last week, and we saw him come back, and then a little later on in the series, he will be a 12-year-old teaching in the temple. And that's about all we know about him until he comes to John to be baptized. And John announces, this is the one. But he needed to be baptized because he needed to go through each and every one of the trials and travails that you and I go through so that he could be fully human and fully connected to each human. So when we come to baptism, I was approached in the early stages of my ministry by a young lady who had had a baby out of wedlock and wanted me to wash away that baby's sins. And it's not an easy discussion to have with someone who feels like that I can't do that. I can't take away that baby's sins because Christ already did it. For me to take credit for that kind of stuff is a little egotistical, which I really don't have a lot of trouble being. But most of all, we need to remember that we're not being baptized. We're not bringing babies to be baptized. We're not bringing friends to be baptized to wash away their sins. We're bringing them so that they can make a commitment to being a friend of Jesus Christ. That's what we signify with our baptism. You only need to be baptized again, I guess, if you have totally lost that friendship. Now I've got I can remember some kids that I was friends with, and well, I better not go back that far. I'll be celebrating my 65th high school reunion this year. And I look forward to it because we were a small enough class that we knew each other. And we were friends with each other. I could stop right here and tell you I was the valedictorian of my class and lettered in 4 sports, and I'd lie through my teeth. But we have friendships, even if they're not avid, busy connections right now. We have friendships. And when we go back to a reunion, when we go back to a family reunion, when we go somewhere and meet people that we have known, there's that connection. And that's what Christ wants out of each one of us. He wants us to feel connected to him. And that's the purpose of the baptism. The Old Testament says it's part of the prophecy. Fine. We need to know how to prophesy and how to understand the prophecies of Christ. But more than that, we need to find that connection with the Holy Christ. For he came and spent time on earth that he could connect with the human in us. He didn't have to. But he chose to do it so that he could be in a position to be the one who saves us. That he could be in a position to be the one who can bless us. Be in a position to always be connected to us. So if someone brings up a baby for me to baptize, it's not my favorite thing, but I'll be glad to do it. If a young teen finds Christ and wants to be baptized, the first question I have to ask is, were you baptized as a baby? Because we'll change the words a little. We'll try not to change the meaning, but we will change the words. I will not baptize, but I will reconstruct. I will rebuild that faith. I will reaffirm that connection. And if the symbol of the water is what makes it happen for someone, I'm glad to use it. But I'm not going to baptize them again. So that's always the first question when someone other than a baby is brought. Have they been baptized before? Now each of you who have become members have filled out a form and you said, were you ever baptized? And a lot of them say, I think so. Well, then we would kind of question whether we're going to do a baptism or not. But why would you want to be baptized? Do you have a connection with Christ? Then you are baptized in the Spirit. If you want it to be affirmed in public, because Jesus said, if you will affirm me in front of everyone, I will affirm you in front of my Father. So baptism is not a secret rite. Baptism isn't something we do in the dark of night. Baptism is a public affirmation of a connection to Christ. So we want to do it in broad daylight. We want to do it in front of as many people as possible. If it needs to be somewhat private, we can handle that. But a baptism is so special because it is the promise of knowing Christ's affirmation of love, of knowing your sins are forgiven, of knowing that Christ will never, never turn his back on you. And we know there are some despicable people in the world. And we think, how could Christ love them? But his love is greater than our hate. His love is greater than our ability to despise, even to dislike. He doesn't ask them to be pure. He asks them to believe. And a baptism is an announcement to the world that I believe. Now, as I said, when you bring an infant to be baptized, you're promising that you believe and that you will do your best so that that child will have no doubts of the love of Christ. So baptism is fun. I love baptism. I like babies. I like to baptize babies because they're nice to me. So far, none of them have cried as I've walked around with them. But I learned earlier, a long time ago, from a pastor that we had in DeKalb, Illinois, who had this marvelous ability to quiet a fussy child and to have no one give him a bad time. I probably ought to see. We don't have many young people here with babies, so I'm not telling anybody anything that they need to find out for themselves. But you always stick the kid's head right here so that when you're talking, you vibrate. And they quiet down. So grandmas, right there. And then talk. Not loudly and not swearing, but just talking. That's my lesson in baby raising. And I never knew it when I needed it. But I love baptism. But it's such a special thing. And we need to make sure that we understand that it's a one-time thing. Because Christ will not break that connection. You may abuse it, you may bend it, you may twist it, you may do a lot of things to your relationship with Christ. But from his side, it stays whole, perfect, and pure all the time. So if you've been baptized and you feel a need to be reminded, to be refreshed, to be whatever, you let me know. I'll be glad to help you out with that. But it won't be a baptism. You already got that done. And it's permanent. And in recognizing what your baptism spoke about when it was first done, you have committed yourself to knowing that even though you will continue to be a sinner, you will always continue to be forgiven. No greater promise, no greater love, no greater joy than to know I am forgiven. I. Thank you. Amen. We're going to sing an unfamiliar hymn, right? We're going to sing Hymn of Promise, number 707. If you stand with me, if you can.